and welcome to the 15th Mindmine Summit. A special welcome to our chief guest, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, Finance Minister of India. The summit has come back in physical form after the big break that we all took due to the pandemic. The pandemic taught us many things. It has made us rethink our priorities. Many people have chosen to change their professions, their path in life, where they spend their time. It truly has been a time for introspection, a time for redefining ourselves as individuals, families, organizations, and also nations. We saw the worst of humanity, and we also saw the best of humanity in this period. People helped strangers that they didn't know. They stopped people on the streets and gave them food. Our systems were completely overloaded, whether it was the healthcare system or it was a system of just managing data and statistics. The system, our system of India, after a slow start and a lot of criticism from overseas, it swung into action in a wonderful manner, and I think the world both realized and now appreciates what was done, both in terms of reaching out to people at large, supporting the world with their needs of medication and healthcare systems, and within the country. You, Madam Finance Minister, stood tall and helped the entire system weather the storm like the one none of us had ever seen. In living memory of the current generations in the world, there was no such event. This was being compared with the World War and such cataclysmic events right through history. This platform of the Mindmine Summit is an annual window that the Mindmine Institute shows to the world. It does some thought papers. It looks at ideas, and the focus is on India, Indians, Indian economy, and India's global relations. So really, a comprehensive 360-degree review for us Indians. And in that respect, we also look at our connect with the world, because that is part of India too. An India that wants to stand up and be counted. An India which is increasingly now invited to the top table in the world. An India which has a growing economy. An India which still faces challenges. We still have millions of people living in abject poverty, even though we have moved millions and millions out of poverty, but that continues to be our single biggest challenge as a nation. This year, we chose a theme, as you saw from the film. The themes every year are relevant to what's going on then and where we are headed as a nation and as a people. This year, we chose a theme of repurposing India for the same reason that I spoke about individual people's views and their rethinking about themselves, that this pandemic made us think. We are also at an interesting cusp. 75 years of being an independent nation, we've come a long way. We became a larger economy than those who ruled us for over 300 years. A fantastic achievement to have become the 5th largest economy in the world. And in an extremely short period, when we were just at 11, just 10 years ago. I think this is truly credit to all Indians and certainly to India's leadership. It needs, therefore, for us to think, where are we going now? We have another 25 years to get to be 100 years old as an independent nation. We may be a young nation, but we are an old civilization. We are not a country. We are not even a continent. We are a civilization. In the way we think, in the way we behave, in the way we interact. In fact, very often, we ourselves do not understand why we behave the way we do, because I think it is genetic. It is coming from millennia of a nation that led the world in intellect, in capabilities, in science, in investigating new ideas, in innovation, in education, in just so many fields. India had led the world. We were the first country in the world to start liberal education. We were also the first country in the world where men and women studied together. We were also a country where we had students from over 30 countries studying here in India. Clearly, over the last 300 odd years, we have slipped. But which is why this is an interesting challenge in front of us. To see how we can lean back on India's strengths, learn from our past, but use it for our future. Understanding fully well that technology, new process, and new ideas are going to play a big role in how the world evolves and develops, and therefore, so will they in India. This summit focuses on all aspects of this development. It has often been said that no nation state can be successful if only half of the energy is being used. The Prime Minister himself, only recently on 15th August, talked about bringing the energy of the female half of the population of the nation to fore. It is the much smarter half of the population. It is about time that we start to focus on how they can play their rightful role. It is also important that all aspects, all parts of the nation start to develop. So in the many sessions that we have today, we will focus on a variety of things like technology, innovation, startups, the economy, the financial markets, what is going on in terms of healthcare, where are we in the area of entertainment, sports. So it is a pretty comprehensive set of sessions, and they're not all based on economy. We do have some which focus on authors, writers, lyricists, filmmakers, because that too is an important part of our lives. With this, I want to thank you for coming here again. You have been to this summit earlier, as we saw in the film. And you have led India in an area and in a time where turbulence was the norm, where it was not just now and then. You have stood tall. Maya Angelou, the lyricist and the memoir writer, once famously said, "Develop enough courage so that you can stand up for yourselves and then stand up for somebody else." You have done that and more. You've stood up for all of us in a wonderful way through good times and bad, especially when the nation and the people needed help and support. You have developed tremendously as a leader over the years, played different roles until you came to this one, which leads the finances of the nation, which allows us to do more or less, whether it's social service or it's development of healthcare, education, technology. So once again, a big thank you for coming in here. And if it's okay with you, we will do this as a conversation. Is that okay? Thank you. India's remarkable resilience through the pandemic saw an amazing piece of work by all sections of society. Many of us in industry pushed you hard to loosen the purse strings, make more liquid cash available to the system. You did what you did it cautiously, carefully, and were criticized by the world. Now, interestingly, the entire world is saying, look at what India did. They were smarter than most others. What drove you at that time to continue to do what you did, but continually cautious? Why did you not open the purse strings as much as many other countries did? What was it that held you back, which now looks like it was the smartest possible thing to have done?
Thank you very much for all the kind words being said here and also out there. Let me start by saying the credit goes to the people of India, people belonging to all levels of income, and the leadership of the Prime Minister, which together gave us the guidance, but also the tenacity, endurance, but also the spirit to fight, all of which I think has resulted in getting India where it is today. And in this, the question that you asked as to what held you back and what made you remain where you are in taking the call, the way we've taken, rather than the way loosening the purse and throwing money as though that will give the solution. I think the question is for them to say as to why they thought that was the blanket solution. Because logic or reasoning will tell you that once you are consulting different sections and they have voiced their concern, each differing from the other, or slightly at least differing from another, the solution had to be given to each according to the way they would want. And therefore, we thought if the consultations are ongoing and if consultations are coming up with concrete suggestions, each to his comfort, each section to their comfort, we thought that's the best way. So it is one thing to listen to advice of, let's say, very respected economists. I have no criticism to offer to them. They had their viewpoint from the point of view of the theory as they teach. But ultimately, I think each country had its own way of solving its problems. We've come out well, and thanks to the credit of the people and their, literally, the confidence that you talk about, Maria Angelo. They acquired the confidence. They thought it was for them to fight through, and the government did stand by them.
So let me take the point I made a little bit earlier. India's economy getting to where it is now, being the 5th largest economy, which are now going to be the big focus areas for you to move India from being the 5th largest economy further up the ladder, maybe to the 3rd, because in power purchase parity, we already are the 3rd. Clearly, we're headed for growth, bigger growth than most others at this moment, and that is quite clear. But the question will be about the balance within the economy, which portions get more attention and which ones get moderated, because a challenge has been thrown out by the Prime Minister for India to be a developed nation by the time we turn 100. And I think it's a wonderful way to look at India. So where is your big focus going to be now?
I think the driver would be engaging the youth power. So sectors which have great potential for engaging them, and when I say youth, I mean youth with all sets of skills. You can start from the bottom to the top, which speaks about frontier technology related skills, innovative skills, or STEM sciences skills, or it can just be very, at the bottom, skilled, not so skilled workers. So when you're planning for the Indian economy for the next 25 years, which we are calling Amrit Kal, and PM has highlighted champion sectors will be the ones with which we start off. But the first litmus test would be how would it benefit the workforce? Some at the leadership level and some at the bottom, or some in the middle. But people come out of universities, colleges, schools with different sets of skills. All of them need prospects for the future. And in that prospect is where the next 25 years is going to be geared. So that will be the testing measure. But otherwise, of course, I will stretch the argument a bit more, not so much to make it a tenuous argument, but it is a fact that 3-4 years ago, when in Davos all of us heard Industrial Revolution 4.2, Web 3, IoT, artificial intelligence, I'm happy to say that India in the last 3-4 years has actually built its capacities on these. Today, if India is showing the way on digital payments, digital influence into your medical practice, setting up of 75 digital derived centers of learning, setting up of 75 digital banking. 75 is because we want to also remember that it happened in the 75th year of independence. The digitization, the rapid influence of digitization, even in areas like agriculture. So we've shown the way since after what we heard in Davos. So that is, I think, the kind of direction. Move it more towards digitization, even more, and also make sure the workforce participation is at its maximum.
So let me take two comments, two things you mentioned. One is labor policy. How do we get more people sustainable economic opportunities? How do we ensure that the system is fair and encouraging of jobs? Because we have had this challenge, probably the single biggest challenge for us as a nation is to ensure the standard of living for all Indians. And I would imagine more than anything else, that's one thing we have to address. But of course, we have to address it through growth. That's the only positive way to do this. So is there a tweak or a change required in our policy to encourage more hiring and better compensation and better work conditions?
Well, if I take the example of the PLI, the Productivity Linked Incentive Scheme, one of the things was, as much as we looked at every addition to the production, every unit in addition that you produce, and at that scale, we were also looking at what will be the impact on our labor force. And when we are talking about MSMEs, that's large, but when we are talking about MSMEs on the other end of the spectrum, we are looking at in situ solutions for MSMEs wherever they are, because locally, they are the ones who give training, they are the ones who are going to be able to employ locally as much as collectively, if you think, as the large-scale units. So the policy has necessarily underlined the importance of labor and engagement of labor, and that's where we think we are pushing technology, digitalization, as much as we are pushing opportunities for work.
You're right. We will need to work on both ends. On the top end, we need to become global leaders, for sure. There's not even an option for many of our sectors. And we have some big leaders here, sitting here, who run global companies, who have demonstrated what India can do. Indians themselves have already led so many global enterprises. So individual capability is not an issue. So it is probably the tweak that's required systemic, is also in the work environment, I think, on both. The other comment you made, or let me stick to PLI for a moment. Chinese companies have gone and done things in manufacturing without fear of actually having made losses, because it in one way or the other gets made up by the government system, whether it's through hidden subsidies or through loans which continue to be non-performing loans. As you know, their percentage of non-performing loans is about the highest in the world. And do you believe the PLI will compensate enough for a whole variety of Indian businesses now to be globally leading? Because it has to be globally competitive first to become globally leading. Do you think that scheme, because the result is yet to be seen, we've only got one company that's been currently cleared for the scheme. Hopefully many more will get cleared in the coming weeks and months. Is that enough, or is there other things we need to do to remove some of this fear people had of getting into manufacturing over the last decade or so? We saw a little bit of a climb, then we saw a bit of a decline, as you know. Now, and it is necessary. Of course, service is wonderful, but we cannot only be a services nation. We have to have a good spirit of agriculture, services, and manufacturing.
You're right in saying we'll have to see how it goes on the PLI, because only one has come and so on. But equally, I'm hearing a lot more companies who are moving out of China, wanting to come because they find the policies a lot more attractive, not just the PLI, but overall the ecosystem is now far more facilitative of such companies coming out to locate themselves in India. If that is one of the things. The second, I think, no policy can be the end to itself. It's not as if we've given a solution and that's the end of the story. It keeps evolving as we go on. So that applies even to those industries which are coming into the sunrise sector, for which we've given the policy support through an incentive. But if it's not sort of impertinent to say this now, I equally would want to know from the Indian industry, what is it that they are hesitant about even further? Since 2019, when I've taken charge of the finance ministry, I've been hearing, though the industry doesn't think it's conducive. All right, bring the rate down. All right, tax rate was brought down. And I keep defending industry, private sector, where even provocatively people have asked, what would you want to tell the private sector? We will do everything to get industry coming and investing here. Give PLI, we've given PLI. I want to hear from the Indian Inc. What's stopping you? When countries and industries abroad think this is the place to be in now, at this time, FDIs are coming, FPIs are coming, it's all, the stock market is so confident, Indian retail investor believes in them. Is it like Hanuman, you don't believe in your own capacity, in your own strength, and has there got to be somebody, standing next and say, hey, you are Hanuman, do it. And who's that person who's going to tell the Hanuman? It can't certainly be the government.
Maybe that's a role you have as well. So, if I look at the world right now, from the global economy flush and sloshing with cash, to a sudden turnaround, continuous and growing inflation across the globe, supply chains highly disrupted, either due to the war in Ukraine or the oil prices going up, or a whole host of little sparks in many places that have taken place. Even countries which had negative interest rates now have either zero or plus. Those who had zero have all gone up. We heard one only day before yesterday raising it 75 basis points in one go, which is very unusual for them, and making a statement that you will see 2 or 3 more increases in the coming days. We have been somewhat protected and certainly better than most of those economies. And by the way, some of that credit, of course, goes to you, while some of it goes to people who work the economy.
for allowing that space, building the guardrails. At the point we are, how do you see the growth taking place? What do you think is the possibility right now for allowing India to take advantage of a difficult global situation? Because we are at this moment better off. We are not where we need to be because we still have work to do, but we are clearly better off. So is there some plan that you have or guidance for this system and put out an expectation from the industry and the players of the economy as to what can we hope to see in India in the next 6 months to a year?
I'm going to take off at a point which probably wouldn't be the expected answer.
Okay.
Now, I'm glad that the PM is talking about the kartavya bhav. You know, sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas, but sabka prayas. I think all of us will have to start doing what we can best do. Of course, infusing in it a certain seva bhav. We are doing it for the country. But of course, I learn my profit. I'll have my own income. All that is fine. But time has come that each one do a bit. Who, after all, started the startup movement? It was the young boys and girls. Haven't they come out saying, we'll be here, we'll show what we can, and then, of course, started saying, wouldn't it be better for you all to give us some support? So, if they could prove it, even despite the pandemic, within 2-3 years, since 2015, PM's support has been upfront for the startups. So I think it's time now to show a prowess, each one of us, for ourselves. And that itself will give the creative momentum. Again, sorry for being referring to stories or mythology or Indian epics.
But that's us, so please
I was very glad to hear you talk of it. Ours as a civilization. It's been in us for a millennia. Haven't we heard of the story of the several birds, all of them on the floor, being deceived by a hunter by throwing a net on it? Each bird tried to get out of it but couldn't. But how did they all get out? By collectively flying on the spot in such a way the momentum was acquired and they lifted off with the net on them. Isn't that a story that all of us will have to look at? Each one may feel powerless, but together, if the will, Jana Manas, if all our Manas says, look, this country has to be somewhere else, but not here, this country includes us. So I would think it's the time to get unfettered in the areas that we are and lift like that flock of birds. Hunter be damned, I'm taking your net and all and I'm flying off. That's the time for India today now. And which place a better place than Mindmine Summit to talk about it?
Absolutely. So therefore, do you think it's time for India to start talking capital convertibility? At one point, and interestingly, the Reserve Bank governor made a statement. I don't remember if it was in a private conversation or a public statement. I think it's not an event. He said it's a journey. So are we expecting or hoping to see some steps, because that is part of our internationalization as well? On the one hand, lowering some of the import duties, that might help with some of the inflation. And on the other hand, looking at 1 or 2 more steps towards capital account convertibility. Are we ready for that?
See, I'm sure you observe government on the Reserve Bank and the various steps that they're taking over the period, and also infer for yourself as to where this is going. What is this attempt now in having rupee trade? It's not the ruble rupee which was of the old format. Now this formulation, which I'm glad the RBI has come up at a time which was so critical, we are seeing interest coming from so many different countries, all of which think Yes, it's possible to trade in, say, rupee, and those are significant points of transactions, and in a way is opening the Indian economy a lot more than what it can imagine to be. So if that is one milestone, may not be that milestone which you would have predicted in the old pre-pandemic India. Now, post-pandemic India is coming up with so many out-of-the-box solutions. Although there are still some who would only, pick up on the old example and say, would you do this, would you do that, would you? No, the solutions are also new solutions. And as a result, I would like to highlight the fact that we are lots more open with the Indian economy, lots more open in the way we are talking to countries. We are willing to have our digital platforms become interoperable between countries to enable cross-border transactions. So there are several tools which didn't exist earlier, through which Indian economy is getting opened up. So I want to have these beads which are getting into the string in your conversation. And that's actually making India a lot more surprise the world, but be there with them. So those are worth studying.
Absolutely. So tax to GDP ratio is up, GST collections are up, revenues overall are up. So lots and lots of good news on that front. These numbers, however, are of averages or of macro numbers. On the micro, however, we still have challenges. And unfortunately, those challenges at this moment exist mostly in small industry or highly labor-oriented activities. And those are the ones which continues to suffer in some sense, still not recovered since the start of the COVID. And that, I think, is something that deserves some kind of attention. And again, I'm not only talking on a subsidy basis, but a supportive system to get them on track for growth. Because there is growth in India at this moment. We are uniquely positioned. If you look objectively around the globe, we are one of the very few large countries which can see 25 or 30 years of secular growth ahead of us. Of course, we'll see some ups and downs, but it seems reasonably clear that we will have a growth path. We put in all the building blocks in the last 10 or 15 years or 20 years in India. And we are now putting in the additional riders which will help accelerate this growth. Do you see us going back to the 10+% growth in the coming years?
Well, it's very difficult for me to predict on specific numbers. But people who are in the job of predicting future, particularly those in business, like for instance the recent Morgan Stanley report, has unhesitatingly said 7 being the average, India will consistently grow at that kind of a number. So those are words coming from people who are normally critical and critically appraise economies. But one point on which I'll go back is what are the kind of ways in which we can support small industries and so on. Even as I do that, and I would seek your indulgence because I'm picking up on issues which are not otherwise meant to be picked up, but mine. So I'm also mining my thoughts and coming out. Now, support to the MSMEs. And I know I'm treading in a dangerous landmine-riddled area. Support to the MSMEs is not just what government can give. It is certainly largely dependent on that. But I'll take an example where all of you all can equally help. Look, we created from the government the TREADS platform. We wanted payments to go to the MSMEs in due time and not be delayed. And there was a time when, there was there was a figure floating around in the public saying it's probably to the extent of 10 lakh crores. Indicating probably all the 10 lakh is due from the government. I spent a lot of time going through it. Yes, of course, government, some state government, some public sector undertaking under the center and some public sector undertaking under the states. But I was surprised to find a considerable due payment, pending payments were also from the big industries. Now, is this just a data that I've taken out from nowhere? I even cross-checked with the registrar of companies to make sure that the statements which are declared by companies naturally would have it. I picked it up to see. They were declared dues by large companies. Now I can push my PSCs, I can request states, I can make sure departments pay up. I can only appeal to the industry. For all the tears that we shed for the MSMEs, my tears, your tears, can we limit the time by which the MSME will get its due? Good enough that you're putting it in your annual statement every year, but when are you marking the time to give them? I think all of us will have to do our bit and equally pull up the other for doing their bit towards the causes on which we are very, very stuck up.
So I can tell you we've had some conversations in CII and tried to get this message out to companies that all of us have an equal responsibility, exactly as the point you're making. We've done one more thing for startups. So since I was chairing this council, so I've made a request both at the National Council and to the other regions that every small company should start to mentor 1 or 2 startups, a medium-sized company 3 to 5, and large companies 10 to 20. I'm glad to report that we got, I'm trying to remember the number, some 600 odd companies sending in their names also to mentor companies. And we got an equal number of startups who were interested. So we've connected them, and we're continuing this as an ongoing basis now, including running classes for the mentors as to how to be a good mentor. Because just having knowledge is not enough. How do you transmit that knowledge in a suitable fashion is equally important. So we are, in a sense, attempting to do this, but clearly there is more work to be done. That is for sure. Incidentally, on all of the subjects that you mentioned, on education, on getting students job ready or to become entrepreneurs, on technology, on healthcare, we have individual sessions on all of these between today and tomorrow at the summit.
I'd like to see the output of each of these conversations.
We'll certainly get them across to you. So any last word from your side as a message to us? We have people here who are economists, industry, academics, researchers. It's a very interesting, diverse, mixed group here.
Well, I'm not sure if I should be the one. In case you have anything to add up, you can. But certainly this is the time for India. Government is willing to hear you, willing to have conversation with you. You should utilize every one of this opportunity and also seek the opportunity to speak to the government and say, look, you're not doing this, you should, it'll make a difference. And I think that's been the approach, that's been the difference in approach between any government earlier and this government. We are willing to hear, listen, talk to you, and also act on what you've given us. So in order that India does not miss the bus this time, together all of us have created the necessary platform and level at which we can take off from there. Having reached here, we can't afford to miss the bus this time. And I've been saying this in the last few weeks, that we're all ready for it. But we can't be staying there and say we are ready for it. We have to take off. And it is in all our hands. So I would think you should constantly engage with the government and keep telling us you have to do a little bit more here, a little bit more there, and so on, so that the momentum is continuously maintained for us to take off. We owe it to this country. All of us have been so blessed. All of us have been so fortunate that we are here where we are. All of us, inclusive of me. We owe it to this country. So let's all take it up from there and be together, converse together, and act together.
Mrs. Sitharaman, as always, great pleasure. A great pleasure to talk to you. You have this unique ability to focus on the little things and also bring out the big picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Can we have a big round of applause?